Hi everyone, this is Jeffrey, JGB146 Blake from Grinderschool.com, a small stakes poker training site, and we're partnering with WSOP.com to bring you some poker training videos. Today we're going to review a session of $50 buy-in PLO that I played recently on the WSOP.com. And first I want to touch on this pre-flop play. So here we have pocket queens with a jack and a 7 suited. We went ahead and called pre-flop. It's not really that strong a hand. We're basically playing for set value, looking to make a set of queens here. Obviously the suitedness helps, and on this board in particular it helps us a little bit, but ultimately we're behind anyone with an ace here, and there's 4 players in the pot, so the chances of us taking this down are really bad. A lot of players with an ace will continue, and obviously a king high flush draw has us beat. Now that said, the flush draw helps us out, but not enough that we want to bet on that flop. On the turn, we're helped a little bit in that we now have 2 pair, but we're still out of position against multiple opponents, and we're at this point going to go ahead and probably call a bet if someone else bets, but we're not going to be really betting out from out of position because we don't want to face the situation where we bet and get raised and end up with a bloated pot. It's easier to play when we're out of position by just going ahead and checking and letting the rest of the people at the table sort of indicate the strength of their hands. If we were in position, if we were in princess's shoes, we would have bet there. And here, again, we check for some of the same reasons. There's a 10-8 out there for a straight, and ultimately, we're going to win if it gets checked around. If we bet, there might be a few ace-x hands that call us, but we're probably not making a whole lot of profit, but there are going to be a lot of better hands that win. 2 pair in Hold'em is a very strong hand. In Omaha, it's really not. It's not a bad hand by any means, but it's not nearly the powerhouse, and against 4 opponents, you don't really want to go too far with it. You can see here I went ahead and pulled up what other people had to sort of review where they were coming from. The next best hand that we were facing looks like was this Max Deep with his 7 deuce for 2 pair. There's a very small chance that he would have called a bet from us because it's such a small 2 pair. He's going to be in trouble against a lot of hands, and anyone else we're certainly getting a fold from. So I think that given our position, this check all the way down was justified. Again, if we had been on the button in position and could have had a little bit more control over the size of the pot, not had to face as much of a chance of being raised off our hand, then we could have made a smaller value bet. Here with 5-5 Queen 3, a lot of people would want to play this for set value, but ultimately the strength of bottom set in Omaha just really isn't there. So I want some kind of connectedness to play with a small pocket pair. I want to have some straight connectedness, some suitedness, possibly with like an ace, to really back up the strength of that hand. So it just really isn't strong enough to play there, and part of that depends on the people you're playing against too. If you're against an aggressive opponents, then that can be more justified. Here again, even with the queens, from this position, trying to play for a set value from out of position just didn't quite seem worth it, given the disconnected nature of our kickers. Again, the deuce there, the fact that we were only single suited, it's just not worth playing from out of position. You really want to avoid the situation that we were in with this pocket queens hand, right? Where we're out of position and we can't really effectively control the size of the pot because we're out of position. It really weakens your ability to play the hand in the way you'd like, and because of that, you have to adjust. And the best adjustment is to wait and play hands in position instead. Here with this pair, we wouldn't call a raise here from the blinds, but obviously we'll go ahead and check and evaluate on the flop. we have a flush draw. It's a very poor flush draw. Any action we get with a 6-eye flush draw is just, we're in trouble. So we just want to go away. We wouldn't want to take a stab at this. Even if we were in position, we wouldn't try to stab at this. We probably would not have played it. Here, I'll probably go ahead and play this hand unless there's a big raise in front of me, because the power of a suited ace is very strong in especially lower stakes PLO games, because you'll get players with weaker draws, weaker flush draws, to go ahead and play back at you. It makes sense to make a continuation bet here with the top pair. We're probably ahead a lot of times, and then we end up with 2 pair here, which is enough to let us continue. Note too that we do have a gut shot draw for a straight, but we should probably be a little bit cautious if we get too much action, because now the 5-4 has made a straight, and that can be problematic for us. Went ahead and continued betting, but if we suddenly get raised, we probably don't want to commit too much more in the hand. And you can see that's what has happened here. And even having 2 pair with the jacks and the 3s, it's very unlikely that we have our opponent completely bluffing us. 5-4 is easily within his range. He could also have a set. It's just not a situation that is going to be profitable to call there. Here our hand is way too disconnected to call a bet. It's probably not worthwhile to even make a pre-flop raise there if it had been folded to us. The king 3 suitedness is nice, but you'll end up with a lot of second best flushes there anytime that you're successful in building a big pot. So we don't want that. So we go ahead and we fold. And again, this hand is too disconnected. The fact that we have 3 cards of the same suit actually weakens the hand quite a bit. And we've seen that Mox Deep is playing a lot of hands. He's starting to get a stack, so he's going to be very likely to play a lot of hands. We don't want to play this out of position against him, and we really don't want to play it at all. You really want all 4 of your hole cards to work together in Omaha, and that's not a situation. Now here, we would have gotten a flush draw. It's a paired board, meaning that even if we get our flush, we're not necessarily comfortable with a big pot, because our opponents can often have a full house, especially if there's a lot of raising and re-raising back and forth. And we could also have the, not the best flush. It's a lot more common in Omaha to run into those big hands, so you want to avoid playing hands that will put you in that situation. You want to avoid playing hands too far to get into that situation, because you want to be on the other side of the coin. You want to be the one with the super strong hand that your opponent is paying off. So here with the 10-9-9 ace, we're out of position. Pocket 9s is not really strong enough to play effectively from out of position. If we had had the ace that was connected to a suit, like if that had been 10-9-9 ace double suited, I probably would have played it even from early position. But short of that, even with just a single suit, I probably would let it go. Obviously, this is an easy fold. And here again, we have pocket kings, and that's good, but we have a 10-3 as side cards. We could easily play this and go ahead and complete just looking for set value with the kings. That can be a way to build a very big pot, but we don't want to make a big raise and get involved against a lot of other players. And here, it's very easy for either of our opponents to have an ace. It's certainly possible that neither does, in which case we have the best hand most of the time here, but we're better off checking. And now that we've achieved our full house by hitting our king on the turn, we're going to go ahead and bet out. Hopefully, there's a lot of draws out here. There's flush draws, there's straight draws. We have some blockers because we have the 10, but we'd really like to get some money in against our opponents having those draws. Um, Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. They both fold, but it's a situation there where we really want to put some money in on that street in order to build a bigger pot on the river. We can't just slow play, even though we have a very, very strong hand. We're seeing lots of bets from Mox Deep when other players are being passive. When anyone seems to be checking down or calling down, he's betting a lot. So that is probably going to, when we're in heads-up pots against him, make us a little bit more inclined to play back at him because we can recognize that he's going to challenge us a bit more. So whereas we might look for a super strong hand against other opponents who are challenging us, we're going to expect some bets from. This hand with the Queen 9 suitedness was tempting, but we're going to be playing out of position against Mox Deep if he continues, and we just don't hit enough boards to make it worthwhile. Sure, we would have hit 2-pair there, but we don't play Omaha looking to make 2-pair. Now here with Queen Jack 10-4, double suited, it's worthwhile to play. Anytime we're first in, we really want to be raising, so we're good to go ahead and play here. It's a connected enough hand. We end up with a flush draw. It's only a flush draw to the 10, however, and we're against multiple opponents, so it's really not worth it to continue much further. We were mostly looking for some spades or for straight possibilities. Here again, we have a double suited hand, lots of straight potential. This is one that is worth playing from here. Since we're playing it, we're going to go ahead and raise it. In case we hit the flop, we want to make a big hand, have a big pot if and when we do so. And here we're actually happy to be getting a multi-way hand because it's a situation where when we hit the board, we hit it strong. We've hit 2-pair. There's the only better hands out there at this point are going to be some, I guess, sets. Otherwise, we're looking at draws. We have backdoor draws to flushes. We have a gut shot to a straight. So this is a good board for us. We're going to go ahead and put some money in. We're willing to invest a lot. If we were just against Mox Deep, we might consider trying to trap him because he is so aggressive. But against 2 players, we want to go ahead, get the money in, hope that they're drawing, and continue. Another hand here that's worth playing, we'll call a raise with it because we have the strong connectedness for straight cards. We don't want to re-raise because we don't have suitedness, but it's strong enough to go ahead and play. With just a top pair, we probably don't need to bet out here. Given that it checked through, we'll go ahead and bet now. We have the ace of clubs, which is going to make our opponent less inclined to play a weaker flush. And now we're going to slow down again because we stopped getting a rush of hands. We might contemplate going ahead and completing here. There's enough connectedness, but the fact that we're out of position, the fact that we know Mox Deep likes to be aggressive, we want a stronger hand to really get involved with him, and that's going to be the most profitable situation we can get in, is a situation where we have a strong hand, well, where he has a decent or to strong hand and we have an even stronger one. You don't get there by playing weak hands out of position. And here again, there's some connectedness, but we're 3 to a suit. Probably won't even play this from the button. The more players get involved, the less we want to play this type of hand because it becomes that much harder for us to hit a hand that actually will win against multiple players, and that much harder for us to get people off their hands post-flop. Okay, we're double suit, or well, we're single suited to the king. We have a little connectedness, but again, it's just not the situation that we're trying to play for. Um, Here with the ace king 5-5 suited to the king, it's just marginal enough that I don't want to play it from this position. I would probably have gone ahead and raised that from like the button. Here we're four suited, and that's just junk. The chances of us hitting our flush at that point have gone down so tremendously that it really ruins the hand, regardless of anything else going on in it. This is another hand that we'd be happy to play just for the cost of the big blind, but not a hand that we want to play if it's raised, given that we'll be out of position throughout the hand. So we'll go ahead and check, and we didn't hit anything very powerful, so we're just going away. A pair of sevens, really a pair of jacks, isn't anything on an ace high board in a three-handed pot in Omaha. This hand, the pocket threes are just so weak. I really don't think worth even completing here. There's no connectedness with our other cards. It's just really not worth playing. Now, we would have flopped a straight draw, but a straight draw isn't necessarily a recipe for winning hand. It could be a recipe for losing a lot of money if your draw doesn't come in, um, unless you can get your opponents to fold. And it doesn't look like that would have been the case. We would have ended up um, playing a pot where we invested too much money against multiple players and ending up with nothing but a loss. Again, too weak a hand to play. Even if it were folded to us, we'd probably let this go because it's just that weak. But we certainly don't want to play it once other players are already volunteering money into the pot. They're just not going to go away, and we're not going to hit our hand often enough. Here on the right, I'm just clicking back and reviewing a couple of hands to see how some of our opponents have played, the types of hands that they've played, just making mental notes to myself. Here again on the left, this isn't a strong enough hand to be worth playing. I want to get some more reads, some more of a feeling for how Max Deep is playing, how often he's being aggressive, to judge how much we need to loosen up our range. I'll note, by the way, that in this hand that we're showing here, if this had been an ace, I would say it's connected enough to play. We have the ace suitedness, so we would have played it with an ace, but not the suited to the king. That removes the straight possibility. And again, pocket deuces up front. Um, Lots of second best hands there. We could make a crappy set. We could make, a second nut flush and just end up spending a lot more money than we earn. We would have hit top pair here on a board with draws. Any action we get is going to be a hand that has us beat pretty much every time. So we see a bet and a call, and I can already tell you that King Queen is not going to end up being the best hand by the end of this hand. Some of the straight draws have already come in. Others are going to be making, we may have some sets out there. We may have two pair situations. Again, it just would have been problematic for us to play. The hands that our opponents have are going to be way stronger, and especially now that we've seen Geeter call. Um, he has a strong hand. Its kin has a stronger hand than we would have had by far. Um, and we can see there, indeed, its kin had the straight. Um, we're going to look back at it over here now that we know our opponent's cards. So its kin had the straight, and Geeter he flopped the set of sevens. He really should have probably played this hand a bit faster, trying to get more money in on the flop. I would have said if we were in his shoes, we would have wanted to pot the flop instead of making the smaller bet that he made. And on the actual table we're playing, we certainly pre-flop with the connectedness of the 8-7. There's a gap, and then we have the jack to come in. We have the double suited situation. It's definitely worth playing. We're going to be heads up against Mox Deep. That's a good situation for us too, because we know he can be aggressive and he can put too many chips in. So we're going to see if we can use that to our advantage. I go ahead and check here specifically to try to entice him into putting some more money in. He checks behind, and that's bad for us. We don't like, obviously, the spade that came in. And I think, based on what we've seen in the past, he's more likely to put money in with a weaker hand if we're checking to him than if we're betting and he has to call. He's going to obviously recognize that there is a flush out there. There is now a straight out there. We have three pair, so we're certainly not going away. But it's better for us to keep the pot small by trying to let him just bet at it than by betting out ourselves and letting him raise it up and put lots of pressure on us. So we'll call here. And then the river really sort of ruins our hand a little bit. Thankfully, he checks behind as well. He could have bet that river to put a lot of pressure on us, but thankfully he didn't, and it worked out for us. And then we'll probably end up playing this hand as well because we have the suitedness with the ace. We have a little bit of connectedness. I chose not to. I guess I wanted to review the hand over here. So again, just weak enough. So looking back, it turns out what Mox Deep had was nothing. He had a pair and was just trying to bluff us off. So it worked out for us. We were able to get him to do basically what we wanted and manipulate the situation to get a fairly large pot. Whereas if we had bet out, at no point would he have folded. I'm sorry. Whereas if we had bet out, at no point would he have called with a weaker hand to pay us off. So in that one situation, because we were heads up, slow playing a little bit was a good way to exploit an overly aggressive opponent. Again, our hand here is not quite connected enough. We have three cards that work well together and then a dangler, a fourth card that does nothing for us. And that's just not a situation we want to be in really much at all in Omaha, but certainly not when we're in early position. The ability to act last and react to what your opponents are doing as opposed to having to act first is just really powerful. But it's also really powerful to be able to control the size of the pot by being the last person to act and either betting or raising or not. Again, we're not connected enough here with that queen to call a bet. We're not going to make enough strong sets, strong straights, strong flushes to justify it. If the queen had been a 7, we might have called this bet. but we're still, the flush potential of our hand is very limited, so we're still really playing it for the straight potential, and we'd much rather have larger cards for the straight. Um, it'd be marginal to play. Not horrible, but marginal. So here's a situation where it's almost as if we had the 7, right? We have 7, 6, 5, and then a 3. That 3 is not great for us. Um, and obviously, it does a lot better for us if it's a 4. We could play this. We know that Min is being pretty aggressive, but we are out of position, um, and it's not going to be a great situation for us post flop most of the time. Again, a lot of ways we could make a strong second best hand, and turns out we got a little bit lucky in deciding not to play it because we got the big raise from Don't Blink. Now here we've been pretty quiet. We have I'm mostly bluffing here, um, but we do have the suited ace to give us some strength, and I also don't want to just fold every single hand every time. So I'm going ahead. I'm betting out. Its kin has been fairly quiet, so I want to take a stab here. Hopefully, our image is paying off a little bit, and hopefully by being a little bit active with some weaker hands, it can pay off when we get stronger hands down the line. I went ahead and limped in here. We have the 7s for set value, which is, it's okay. It's not great, but it can lead us to have a good hand. Unfortunately, it can also lead us to have a good second best hand. We also have the ace high 7, the ace 7, so the ace high suitedness to go for a strong flush or flush draw, and that's almost more of the reason that I played here. In retrospect, I would have preferred to have raised this hand as well. I think, again, as we've talked about before, anytime we're playing, if we're the first one in the pot, we should probably be raising. And if we're not comfortable enough with our hand to raise, then we probably shouldn't be playing it. Go ahead and check here, and then on the turn, our hand is strengthened a pretty fair amount in that we have top pair now with the strong kicker, and we also have that nut flush draw. Given that it's been checked around to us twice, we can take advantage of our position, make a strong bet, and in this case, take it down. We're happy with that because most of the time we're getting played back at. It's probably by something stronger than top pair, and we're going to have to either hit like the ace or hit the flush. So it's a lot of slow and steady wins the race. You don't really want to be throwing chips around willy-nilly, even though a lot of Omaha players do that. Unless and until you have a strong read on your opponent that that's going to pay off, there's usually better and more consistent ways to make a profit. And that's what we're doing here. Once again, this is a hand that, had we played pre-flop, would have been putting us in an awkward situation post-flop. So we're happy to have not played it and wasted our money on getting in with a top pair type of hand. Obviously, we would have folded long ago, but any money we put in would have been a waste. Again, even though we're double suited there, even though we have the king queen, the deuce and the 7 just weakens the hand enough that there's not a lot we can really make happen. There's no way that we're calling a raise here. If the 4 were a jack, we'd happily call, but with the 4 out there by itself and no suitedness, that would have been a horrible hand to play. And we don't even want to complete with this with this hand. If again, we need more connectedness, we need a stronger suit. This hand is connected enough that we definitely want to play it in position. If it had been folded to us, we should have raised. But given that we have a limper and that he's a short stack player already, I think going ahead and just calling is probably appropriate. Looking to find a flop, obviously, that we hit. Given that we did not hit this one, I don't think it's necessary to bet out. We can try to take it away on a later street if it checks around again. But instead, we end up finally hitting the river. Obviously, we're betting here. We're probably not going to get much value. We don't have the nut hand, so we don't want to get raised. We'd have to actually play pretty cautiously if we were raised. And it ends up, we split the pot, both of us running into the straight. But I think that's okay. Again, we might have done better if we had raised that up earlier since everyone was checking around. But it wasn't a bad situation. Once again, a hand that looks kind of pretty, but is not worth playing from early position at all. We would have made a set here, but that set would either be against some pretty powerful draws, or a larger set, or we wouldn't have gotten much of a pot. Those are sort of the situations you run into when you have bottom set. And basically that's the whole point, I guess, that I want to make, is you don't want to play hands where making a big pot is going to lead you to have the second best hand. And making a big hand is worthless if it's only going to get you a very small pot. And again here, this is a hand that's slightly connected. A lot of players would want to play it because you have the connectedness, you have the 4 low cards, but we're going to be out of position. We don't have the strength of getting a strong flush draw, so the fact that we're suited doesn't matter a whole lot. And the best thing we can do is, get really, really lucky with a random board like this. Sure, if we knew this was coming and we knew that there was going to be action, we'd be happy about playing it. But those situations just don't happen often enough to justify playing weak hands pre-flop. And even when they do, even when you hit the 4s here, a lot of times you're not going to get action, and a lot of times when you do, you're going to run into a strong hand. So like here, we would have hit 3 of a kind, but someone else would have hit a full house. And then even though we hit the ace on the river to make a full house, it's a worse full house than our opponent had. We would have lost a lot of chips. He would have had kings full of 4s. We would have had 4s full of aces. So big pot, probably wouldn't get our stacks in, but it's a big pot that we would have lost. It would have been unlucky, but at the same time, it's a situation that we would have gotten into because we played a junky hand. Now, avoiding those junky hands can avoid those bad situations. So here, we're in the blinds. It just costs us a little bit to complete. We're double suited, and we still fold. And that's because we really, we're looking at that. The deuce 5 flush draw gives us nothing. The jack 10 suited, that's helpful, but we're basically, in playing that hand, we're basically playing a hold'em hand, maybe 1.5 hold'em hands, in a game where you want a 4-card hand to maximize your chances of making a strong hand. So even for half a bet, we fold those junky hands. you get enough strong hands to play. So here it's folded to us. We have kings. We're suited. Even with 3 of the suit, it's strong enough to play. We're going to go ahead. Now we have the second nut flush draw. We have the overpair. Again, strong enough to play. And we're going to bet it. And, we don't pick up a huge pot, but we pick up a little bit of a pot. And that's enough. That fit the strength of our hand. And if we had been called there on the turn, we would have had to play it a bit slower. We would have tried to control the size of the pot and gone from there. Here, it's a mediocre hand, and it's not something we want to play. Again, if we were at a table full of players that were playing tight, we could play stuff like that more readily. But we've seen some back and forth with weaker hands, and we've seen, we have the 3 cards of 1 suit there that weakens us. We would have ended up with 2 pair, but any king is a higher 2 pair. There's a flush out there. There's a straight out there. The 2 pairs is just not worthwhile. And you see the flush is there. It's really tough for a lot of beginning players coming from No Limit Hold'em to fully fathom how weak a lot of seemingly strong hands are in Omaha, but they really are weak. Here, obviously, we're double suited with pocket aces. We're going to be playing a big pot here. We'll be re-raising pre-flop, especially against a short stack. We want to get as much money in as quickly as possible. Then this board is wonderful for us. Having the nut flush draw and having the pocket aces, we're committed to this hand. We got enough money in pre-flop to justify just committing to the hand and getting as much in as possible at this point. There's a concept that a lot of Hold'em players will be familiar with called stack to pot ratio, SPR. So in Hold'em, you want to have big pairs and big single, like big card hands like ace king are hands that you want to get as much money in pre-flop as possible, to try to get them so that you have a small relative stack size. That's the type of way you want to play with a big ace type of situation. So you want to be able to commit big against short stacks, and then having the big draw to back it up is just all the better. So we're definitely getting in here with the overpair and the flush draw, but if we didn't have the flush draw, it would be a little bit tougher. And the fact that we're out of position, we probably still, because of the stack sizes, would have been committed, but we wouldn't have been delighted about it. Certainly worked out for us there. And I think we're going to go ahead. The table's kind of breaking. We'll go ahead and wrap this up pretty soon. So here, we're 4-handed, so that strengthens us a little bit. There's fewer hands for us to run into. I think it's worthwhile here. This isn't a great hand because obviously a king with a 7 isn't going to coordinate very well together, but there are a number of ways we can make some powerful straight draws here. We obviously have the double suitedness. It'd be more powerful if it was like the king and the 9 were one suit and the jack and the 7 were the other suit, but it's worth a raise when we're 4-handed. We get 1 call, and again flop a very strong hand. So we have the king high flush draw now, and we have 2 pair, and we have a little bit, I guess, a gut shot to a straight. So here we're certainly willing to play a pretty big pot, get a lot of money in. Our hand's strong and has got a lot of ways to get stronger. Our opponent doesn't flop much of anything. That's fine. As I said before, we're looking to play the big pots where we win. We don't want to play small pots with our strong hands, and we don't want to play big pots with weak hands. If our opponents don't have anything, there's no way to pay us off. That's fine. We'll, just move on from there. But it's far better to take down lots of small pots than to let weaker hands continue for cheap. We're three-handed, so you could or four-handed, so you could almost justify calling there, but it certainly is a little bit excessive. That hand's just junk. You can see that sort of everyone's table is starting to open up a little bit compared to how we were playing when we were full. That's appropriate, but I don't want to get too far into that with this video. So, like I say, we'll go ahead, wrap things up with this next orbit. This will be the last hand that we cover here. It's a decent one. Again, the 5 weakens us, but we are double suited, and we do have the ace-10 connectedness, and since we're short-handed, this becomes a playable hand, whereas it wouldn't be at a full table. Obviously, hitting a set of 10s is more powerful now than it would be if we were at a full table under the gun as well. So with that, we'll go ahead, we'll wrap things up for today. For more poker training, subscribe to grinderschool.com and use the discount code WSOP25 to save 25% on your first subscription.